century. These days, seems everything has its price, even the law. This is the world of the Psycops, covert operation teams who operate outside of the system, against the system, because sometimes actions speak louder than words. Psycops has targeted the McKiLL Corporation. These boys just stepped over the line. Their crime: illegal bioweapon program, genetic weaponry based on human DNA. We got enough on Nakamichi to justify a raid, and that's where I come in. Psycops Agent Manson, Hawk Manson. Like other agents, I'm packing the usual body enhancements and enough firepower to take out a city. Anything to give me the edge. It's an invisible war we're fighting, and if you get caught, no one will ever know. But I ain't got no problem with that. The Psycops directive is my kind of ride.
Welcome back to McKiLL TV. Today, wanted to look back on another retro game. A game I've been meaning to cover ever since I covered the first game in this series. So today, we'll be taking a brief look back at 1999's Fighting Force 2. Fighting Force 2 is the sequel to 1997's Fighting Force, a game that I previously covered on this channel. And if you haven't seen that, or maybe you're not familiar with these games, I recommend you go back and check out that previous video. Anyway, Fighting Force 2 released on Sony PlayStation and Sega Dreamcast back in December of 1999, developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Entertainment. Just like the first game, technically, this is a beat-em-up with third-person shooter, but ultimately feels much different from the previous game. Here in Fighting Force 2, you take control of the only playable character returning from the first game, as the sequel story is centered around mercenary covert agent Hawk Manson, who was one of 4 playable characters from the previous game. Fighting Force 2 features only single-player story with no multiplayer options. Fighting Force 2 features tank controls, but tries to play like the third-person shooter. And revisiting this game nowadays, this can be a very frustrating game to play because it simply feels very clunky and slow in comparison to the first game. When I first played this game back in, 2001 or so, I remember really liking the game, and for whatever reason, I don't recall the game's controls being this clunky or slow, and just overall difficult to grasp, but revisiting this game, like I said, might prove difficult for many, as well as myself. This go-around, Fighting Force 2 overall, is a much slower paced game than before, with this sequel taking a different approach this go-around. The game's levels are now much larger and time-consuming than the first game, with many areas throughout levels needing items such as keycards to open certain doors, so exploration becomes a much bigger piece of the gameplay, with some levels taking only around 10 minutes and other larger levels taking closer to an hour to complete. So this game's runtime really varies overall. Like the first game, however, this game also features boss fights that occur towards the end of certain levels, but none of which are all too difficult or memorable overall. The ones that stick out to me the most would be the Cyber Spider boss and the final boss, which is the Ultimate Being. To me, these two were the most two interesting bosses in the game. Unlike the first game, Fighting Force 2 actually tries to give you a story narrative. Set not in the too distant future, human cloning has become a reality, but has become banned by international treaty. The McKiLL Corporation, sorry if I fucked that up, is suspected of researching human cloning, as they're believed to be attempting to develop some type of illegal bioweapons. So, mercenary covert agent Hawk Manson is sent in to investigate the corporation's illegal activity and put a stop to it. As the game progresses, small readable inserts can be read that contribute to the game's story, with the only dialogue being delivered from our protagonist during the game during cutscenes, with the character's voice acting being almost too edgy and comical at times. But I guess it wasn't too absurd for a game from 1999. Gameplay here features a lot of hand-to-hand combat, as well as the use of many melee weapons and firearms. And this go around, the game features a weapons and items menu, with many weapons being kept for reuse and many others being disposable. The game's item menu are displayed similar to a game like Metal Gear Solid, as an on-screen scroll that pops up during weapon and item changes. Unlike the first game, which was met with some reasonable reviews, Fighting Force 2 was met with more mixed reviews, and was overall not as successful as the first game, with many saying the game's levels were too large at times and that the game was easy to get burned out on. Also, many criticized the changes in gameplay and controls from the previous game, and due to its overall lackluster sales and a less than pleased fanbase, the series would meet its end, as Fighting Force 3 was cancelled during its early development and core design would close down for good. Overall, Fighting Force 2 was an okay game that I enjoyed back in the early 2000s, but when revisiting this game today, it is very flawed, with many undercooked ideas that weren't executed properly overall. I really enjoyed the first game in this series and had fun at times with this sequel, but it's hard to go back nowadays and get into this game with its crazy tank controls and strange camera angles. Anyways, if you enjoyed looking back at this game from 1999 and have watched till this point, please give this video a like. And if you're interested in more retro gaming videos, you can subscribe to McKiLL TV for more videos just like this. But until next time, this has been McKiLL TV, and I'll catch you in a future video.